Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Rob Webb. We're going to be taking a look at an excerpt from our Net Analyst training called The 5 Sources of Network Latency. To begin, latency is the amount of time it takes for a packet to travel from one host to another. So as it travels across a network, there's an amount of time involved in that. That's normally measured in network round trip time. That's from the beginning of where it's been sent from host A till it's received by host B and responded to back to host A. So you actually have a round trip time mixed in with that. That round trip time becomes very significant in your ability to deliver applications to your end users. The more network round trip time, the slower the delivery is. Typically, TCP has ways of overcoming that. We'll talk about that in later sections and more advanced. But what we want to focus on is when you have a network performance problem, where is that problem located? Okay, it's one thing to say it's the network, but we want to be able to break it down into 5 sources of network latency so you can understand which component of network latency is really causing the problem so that you can address it properly and apply the right resources to it. The 3 most significant sources we are going to talk about are serialization delay, queuing delay, and distance delay. Right? Now there's 5 total, those being the most significant. The others consist of routing and switching delay and also protocol delay. And we're going to break each of those down in some detail for you so you have an understanding of these. Right. Serialization delay is when you talk about bandwidth or increasing bandwidth or not enough bandwidth, what you're really talking about is the amount of delay caused by the serialization of a packet. So your packet, your data is traveling inside your computer or a switch or a router or any computer system in a parallel manner. In order for it to go across the network, it has to be serialized. It has to be turned in from a parallel signal into a serial signal 1 bit at a time, and that takes time. The faster that interface is, the less time that takes. Here we show a graph of what happens with a 1500 byte packet as it gets serialized at different speeds. At the slower speeds, over here on the far left, we show a 56K circuit that'll take over 200 milliseconds to serialize a single 1500 byte packet. Whereas on the far right, we're talking more of the T3 speeds, where it takes less than a millisecond to serialize the same packet. So as you can see, as you increase your overall bandwidth per interface, your delay per interface for serializing decreases. So on the slower segments, serialization delay has a very large effect. At a T1 speed, a 1500 byte packet takes just under 8 milliseconds to serialize. When you get up to T3 speeds, then it becomes much less significant in your overall network round trip times. Queuing delay is a function of bandwidth and utilization, right? Bandwidth being how long it takes to serialize. Well, as additional packets are received into the router interface and waiting their turn to be serialized, they have to be buffered. Because the first packet in is being serialized, any subsequent packets are buffered until they can be serialized themselves. This delay is called queuing delay. Queuing delay is going to be a component of how fast you can serialize the packets ahead of you, how big those packets are, and how far down, how many packets are ahead of you, how far down in the queue you are. And because of those natures, this delay is going to vary based off how busy that particular interface is. Anytime you're queuing up or you're busier, you're going to have more delay involved. If you have enough delay and that queue fills, the default reaction of any queue is what we call tail drop. It indiscriminately drops all packets that are received once the queue is full. And that results in packet loss, which results in retransmissions, which results in significant delays. Queuing delay in the router looks like this, where we have the packets waiting to be processed. P0, packet 0 here is being serialized. It's already been received. So if this is a T1 interface and all these packets are 1500 bytes, it takes about 8 milliseconds per packet. So P0 is going to take 8 milliseconds to be serialized. Well, if P1, P2, P3, and P4 have all been received at the same time, or right sequentially to each other with no gap, they're each going to have to wait for P0 to be serialized. P2 is going to have to wait for P0 and P1 both P3 is going to have to wait for 0, 1, and 2, and so on. Okay. When there's a significant amount of delay, like I mentioned, once all of those packets, once the queue becomes totally full of packets, the tail drop occurs. Tail drop results in discards. Here we show discards out because the queue is full, you have outbound discards. I'm often asked the question of what is the proper threshold for bandwidth that we should monitor or alert on when we have exceeded so we know we're having problems. Well, my answer is bandwidth isn't your best metric for monitoring your operations of your network performance. You should be looking at errors and discards. Discards in this case are caused by overutilization, but here you're seeing where discards are occurring even though that the measurement is only showing about 60% bandwidth utilization. That's because in spike conditions, when instantaneous parts in time, the queue becomes full, packets are dropped, but your overall average bandwidth is only showing 60% utilization, even at the spikes. If we look at that same graph out over time, in this case a week, we can see that on this particular day we had over 80,000 discards, which is very significant, and I guarantee your phone's ringing, your boss's phone's ringing, and his boss's phone is ringing because whoever is at this remote site is very upset about this performance. Because of that, because nobody's been doing anything about it, now it's gotten really bad. Whereas if you'd been paying close attention earlier, the 2 days prior, we see some loss, not as significant, but you could have already been working on this, had a plan of action, and when your boss asks you what you're going to do about it, you'd already be able to have an answer for him, tell him what you're doing and tell him what he needs to do as well in order to resolve this. And not only do you not get chewed out over the whole deal, you become the hero because you're being proactive instead of reactive, right? Outbound discards are a very important metric to be monitoring along with others.